Trapped in Hordak's innovators, He-Man has proposed to Skeletor that they combine power to break free.
Okay, I'll do it. Just don't tell anybody.
Quickly, Skeletor. It's now or never. A ray beam arched from Skeletor's hand towards He-Man's innovator.
Don't forget, we have a deal. You can have Stondar, I get the double-crosser Hordak.
Skeletor beams weaken the restraints. Free. And now to repay your hosts for their kindness. What a book this was. So what we're looking at is He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, the newspaper comic strips. And this was one of the stories I did not get to see. I did not get to read this until as early as Thanksgiving. This is the collection. Now, this came out, I don't know, like 10 years ago. Okay, about just maybe under or over 10 years ago. This is a classic review, and I really enjoyed it. When I was a kid, okay, I had many influences. My first influence were stuffed animals, then Fisher-Price toys, then Masters of the Universe, and Garfield comic strips. And then after that was the Nintendo and DC Comics and Super Nintendo. And as I got older, I had different influences. Then I got to girls in college because I didn't have much of a love life in high school. That's a whole other story, right? Pieces of my life you can find throughout my YouTube videos. But Garfield comic strips had the Sunday funnies. You had 7 days of the week. 6 of those days were black and white, 3-panel strips. With Peanuts, it was 4 panels. And in this collection, now, the physical book, which I would say is probably better, right? If you get the physical book as opposed to the digital, but it's way expensive. It's like over $100 and something just to get the physical book. Now, I have an encyclopedia that's physical. My He-Man art book is physical. Many of my comic books are physical. Some of the comic books from 2014 are digital Kindle and on this Kindle. So it was difficult to really get this book at a good price. I could only do it for I think I got it for $7.99 on Black Friday sale. And I'm glad I got it because otherwise it was going to cost me a bit more. And you get several comic strips. Now, what they tell you in the foreword is that a lot of the comic strips got lost due to time, and they were extremely hard to find. And no reproductions were made prior to the cancellation of the series. So the series ran from the early to mid 80s all the way to 1991. You'd start off with the Hordak and the Horde and Skeletor and Rock-On and Stondar, right? The Cosmic Story, which is a big glorified Filmation setup, to different stories. And I really enjoyed a lot of them. Now, as we go through the different stories, it got slowly lamer. But every story was like a detective story or a comic book story you'd see in the late 60s, early 70s, or when He-Man's on an adventure and you got to figure out how to solve a problem. You have myth and mystic energy and stories of epic, just of fantasy and magic and Joseph Campbell mythology kind of thing. And there were 2 stories before we got to the last story. Now, the last 2 stories were like He-Man in Wonderland, which was Alice in Wonderland, which was very lame. And then there was another one that had to do with the Quake Master, which is like an evil supervillain that you would see in like Batman or Superman comic books from the late 50s, early 60s, which I thought was stupid. And the sorceress had to be a person outside of the castle, which how could she do that? I guess there's a way to do it, but it was just kind of cheap the way she became immortal. But it was just, the writing was very cheap. Anyway, I didn't like those last 2, but the final story, which was dealing with the space characters and going to outer space, that was to tie into the 90s cartoon, which didn't last very long. And I feel like the best version of the space story isn't in solid form. If you take the best episodes of the cartoon and you combine it with the 4 mini comics that came with the toys in the 90s, and you combine it with these comic strips, you'd have a really good epic of what He-Man and Skeletor were doing out in outer space. Because here, uh, the future champions, Hydron, Flipshot, they don't, spoilers, okay? They don't choose both characters. They only go look for He-Man, and Skeletor just like stows away. Skeletor, neither warrior wears the new outfits, and they go back home at the end of the story. So, and at the end of the story, unlike the cartoon, He-Man reveals his identity as Prince Adam after the journey, not before the journey. So it's kind of like a weird thing, but that was the way to end it. To have a good message of good journey at the final comic strip. But many of the comic strips got lost due to time. So instead of getting every single strip with every single description, you would have a sort of a gray tone rectangle with a little paragraph saying what's happening in the comic strip because you couldn't find those strips. With Garfield and Peanuts and Andy Cap or BC or Kathy or Marvin or Dilbert, you could find the stories chronicled. They're chronicled. But with Masters of the Universe, it was difficult. Even with Spider, you could find the stuff to Spider-Man or Mary Worth, or I don't know, Love Is, or I don't know, U.S. Acres, or what other ones were there? Grim the bull terrier, the yellow dog. So unfortunately, that's what happened to time and distance with this. I enjoyed it. It was one of the joys I would have when there wasn't much. Garfield, like I said, you have 6 days of the week in black and white, and on Sunday you have full color strips with like 7 to 8 panels. Okay, but the rest of the week you have 3 panels and 3 to 4 panels, all in black and white. Now today everything's in color because color is more affordable, and you have color, but they were simpler strips. They're still simple strips. Um, but I like the idea of black and white. I like the idea of simplicity. So that's why when you see the characters here in black and white, it was affordable to do it that way. I might be making my own stories soon. Buck Rogers dealing with black and white and color strips because I like that idea. I like telling a story effectively, but in simple form because we don't have as many resources as we like. So that's what I was raised on. Now to give a score on this, that's my overall fit. Somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4. I think some of the stories hurt, but I think they were very good. Mara's character for the space era was just poorly written, but they were nice stories. And it's a good experience, but I don't think it was better than some of the more recent comic books. I would just say this was very good. So that's it for my review. And more to come. More to come. Good journey.